in his room were relatives who was there to take him. And I finally realized, she called me one night saying that he was having a rough night. She wanted me to come over and give him a blessing. And I did, and I laid my hands upon him. And I realized at that time that it was his time to go. And I also realized that the blessings that I was giving him was prolonging that, what it was supposed to happen. That was him dying. And I realized that his relatives was there waiting for him, and I could not give him another blessing to calm him down or whatever, relieve the pain. I gave him a blessing, and I released him, released his spirit. And I also told his spirit to go to the light. And I went out, told my goodbyes to her, and I went home. And I only lived about maybe 5 minutes away from her house at that time. And when I was walking into my house, the telephone was ringing, and it was her. And she told me that Bill had passed, that he had passed almost after I walked out the door.
Oh, wow.
Being a healer is something that can be tremendous one minute, and the next minute it could be one of the most horrible things that you've ever had to do, They call them gifts. I don't call them gifts. I call them abilities, because sometimes when you have to release a spirit so that he can die, is not really a gift. It's like a curse almost. And so I call my abilities. Anyway,
well,
so much for that.
I'm going to tell you a little story about my father. My father had dementia, and it was really bad. But then they later on, we had to put him in a nursing home, and then he had Alzheimer's on top of it, and he was in the nursing home for 2 years. The last year, maybe last year and a half, he didn't even know who I was. He didn't know, my brother. He didn't know, his grandkids, other than he thought they were Martians because they had crew cuts, and he thought they were Martians. Then he went to the stage where he wasn't talking at all. He was a vegetable stage. All the doctors said that, he's going to go anytime. There was no chance. I mean, they said his brain was gone. That's what they said. Totally. I get a phone call early in the morning, and I lived maybe 60 miles from the nursing home where he was at. And they called me up and they said, your dad is talking. And, I said, how can that be? I mean, he went through all the stages of the swearing. You know how Alzheimer's gets. I mean, he was totally, no more than a vegetable. I mean, so I hurry and get to the nursing home. He's sitting up in bed. He totally recognized me. He asked me if I had the same business, and we talked. And then, he totally was coherent. I mean, absolutely, totally coherent. And it shocked me. I was in total shock, and the doctors were all in shock. In fact, they had a couple, I guess, neurosurgeons or whatever they are, were there, watching him, because they were all amazed. And then, he said, hey, I was talking to your mother. Now, my mother died a couple years before that. And he goes, I've been talking to your mom, and, I'm going to be going here in a little while. And I'm going to be with your mom. I've been talking to her brothers, my uncles, and, he was talking, that he was talking to Sally, his mom, and then he started telling me what heaven was like and all this stuff and how nice it was, right? And, I stayed there as long as the doctors would let me, stay there, which was probably about an hour or two. And I get in the car, and by the time I get home, I get a phone call, he died.
Yeah.
And then, I talked to the doctors afterwards. I said, how can this be? And they said, we never seen anything like that ever. Never. It was so, it makes me wonder, about the human brain, but then like he was talking about my mom and stuff. I don't think he was hallucinating because he was too coherent on everything else. So, I mean, it was the strangest thing I've ever dealt with in my life. It was the hardest thing to deal with emotionally. It's just, it was so emotional.
Our human bodies is quite marvelous. It's a miracle pretty much. But there's only one thing that makes our bodies move and function the way they do, and that's our spirit. And once our spirit leaves, all this body becomes as a shell. And I really do believe with all my heart that a lot of times these patients, that's like that one guy had brain cancer and stuff, I think they are able to go back and forth from our earthly realm to that realm that I was talking about where my grandfather was. I think they're able to go back and forth. And, if they want you to communicate like your father did to you, they can fix that. There's no problem with fixing that where he can do that. I've heard so many stories like that where just before they die, they communicate, they can talk. I had one guy eating ice cream and pizza in the hospital, and he was supposed to die. And I get home, and again, he just died, and the family couldn't understand it because, he was in a really bad shape, and he was passed out or in a coma or whatever, and then he comes to and he's hungry. But then after he eats and everything, and I go home, he's gone. So the human body, the human soul is so miraculous that it's hard to explain. But I do a lot of that stuff as far as I've had a lot of communications with my ancestors and stuff on that astral projection, and they've told me a lot of things about stuff like that. I don't want to communicate it now.
I just kind of think maybe because me and my dad had before, because I'm the one that had to put him in the nursing home, but before that we had a major falling out. Okay, major falling out. I couldn't attend my mom's funeral, and he, resented that like you wouldn't believe. And I think what it was maybe, he went to another plane or whatever, and for closure, he had to, make peace with himself and make peace with me, or at least make me feel good, okay? And which he did accomplish that. I mean, there was no hostility left. We even talked about what happened, and it was none. And I think, I just think he knew everything. I don't know. Like I said, it's the strangest thing. I'm starting to get a little emotional just even thinking about it. About what happened, And I've had a doctor on the show, and we were talking about this, and he said, no, maybe the other part of the brain, retains something. But I mean, I disagree. I think probably because he was a vegetable. I mean, he probably was in and out of whatever state numerous times while he laid in that nursing home that last, year, that maybe that to go to heaven or to one of the levels, the next level, he had to make peace.
Yeah, exactly. Can I tell you a little story? I told you
Go ahead.
Earlier that I saw my own death in that astral projection. And I had a radio show host ask me, Well, in this projection, I was up at the ceiling in this hospital room, and I looked down and I saw my body laying on this gurney, and there was a doctor and nurse there, and they were talking back and forth, and I realized it was me, which kind of upset me, seeing my body and knowing that I was dead. And then I went through the ceiling of this room, up through the roof of this hospital, and I could see the lights of this town or this city. And as I was going up, this radio show host says, "Well, did you recognize it? If you saw your own death, did you recognize the town or whatever?" And I said, "Well, back in 1983, I was in Phoenix, and I did not recognize it. When I first saw the astral projection, I did not recognize the town, but I do now." And my wife was sitting beside me, and I never told her that before. I recognized the town, that it's the town that I'm living in now. And she kind of really freaked out at that. But, yeah, strange things happen in the human mind, and it happens through the spirit of your spirit. But anyway, I'll tell you the rest of the story. I was going through the ceiling of this hospital, and I was out into the sky, and I was going high, and I was going at a really fast rate of speed. And finally, I was in outer space, and I could look down, and I could see the Earth. And I saw how beautiful it was. It was completely different than the rest of the planets out there. And I was thinking to myself, how can something so beautiful out there be so ugly down on its surface? The wars and the rapes and the murders and every other thing that mankind does to each other, And a voice came to me, and that voice said, "The earth is fulfilling the purpose for which it was created." Now, that is a very profound sentence to say.
Oh, yeah.
Because number one, it says the earth was created, and number two, the earth is fulfilling the purpose for which it was created. And so whatever goes on the surface of this earth, we might not understand. We might not know why it's happening, but the earth is still fulfilling that purpose for which it was created. And then I started worrying about my family members, what they were going to do without me since I died. And that voice came back to me again, and it said, because of the choices you made and because the things that you did in your life is the reason why you're at this point now. And it said your family has to go through the same hardships, the same stumbling blocks that you had to go through in order for their spirit to become strong also. So they too can be where you're at right now, which is another profound thing. It kind of told me that this life is like a test, and whatever you endure or overcome makes your spirit stronger. And that's the purpose of this, to make your spirit stronger. Like your father dying or somebody in your family dying that you cared for, and you mourn and grieve over that. You're supposed to go through that because at the other side, your spirit becomes stronger. And so because of this astral projection I had, I came out of it with a whole different aspect of things, so looking at things. I don't look at Earth as an ugly thing anymore, even on the surface. I know what my family's going to go through because he, because it was a male voice, told me that they were going to, and they had to make their spirits stronger. So there's a purpose for that. So I gained tremendous